great outdoors can be breathtakingly beautiful, but it can also be unforgiving, deadly, and utterly merciless. From remote mountain peaks to quiet forests, open highways, and serene lakes, nature's allure often hides deadly risks. While many venture outside seeking adventure, freedom, or tranquility, some encounters with the elements, wildlife, or sheer human error end in unimaginable tragedy. Here are 5 of the most disturbing deaths during outdoor events, each one a chilling blend of festivity, misfortune, and fate gone terribly wrong.
Flipping this morning, we're now learning that Trails Carolina will not face an involuntary manslaughter charge. It comes after a 12-year-old boy died back in February.
It was February 2nd, 2024, when 12-year-old Clark Harmon arrived in the cold, mountainous expanse of Transylvania County, North Carolina. He had traveled all the way from New York, escorted by hired guardians, to attend Trails Carolina, a wilderness therapy camp his parents believed could help him manage his ADHD and anxiety. They imagined a place where Clark could grow, find calm, and gain the tools to navigate life. Instead, it became the place where his life would end. At first, Clark was understandably upset, clinging to the uncertainty of a strange environment. He eventually complied with instructions, though he chose not to eat dinner that evening, a small act that would become a haunting detail in the story of his last night. He was assigned to Cabin 6, joining 4 other young campers under the care of 4 staff members. What was supposed to be a routine night of settling in became anything but. Clark was placed in a bivy bag, a weather-resistant sleeping device often used by hikers, but repurposed here as a containment tool for campers deemed at risk of running away or having outbursts. These bags were equipped with alarms to alert staff if someone tried to leave, but the bivy bag assigned to Clark was damaged. Its ventilation mesh was torn. Instead of properly repairing it, staff simply sealed the outer layer, creating a coffin-like enclosure with dangerously limited airflow. That night, Clark was restless. Staff noticed him mumbling and moving within the bag. They briefly removed him, allowing him a few moments of fresh air outside, but after he fell asleep, he was returned to the bag, resealed, alarm blaring. The staff conducted routine checks through the night, but the opaque material prevented any real assessment. They saw movement but could not see the truth inside. In the early hours of February 3rd, Clark stopped moving. The lack of airflow in the sealed bivy bag had suffocated him, silently and unnoticed. It wasn't until the next morning, around 8 a.m., that staff discovered his lifeless body. Cold and rigid, his knees bent unnaturally, arms crossed over his chest, skin discolored, froth at his mouth, a grim testament to the struggle his young body had endured. His pants and underwear were found near his shoulder, yet he still wore his hoodie and t-shirt. Emergency responders estimated he had been dead for hours. The Transylvania County Sheriff's Department immediately launched an investigation. An autopsy confirmed the horrifying truth. Clark had died from restricted airflow, and his death was ruled a homicide. But Trails Carolina staff resisted full cooperation. They refused to provide access to the other campers or share their identities. Investigators uncovered a pattern of negligence. Warnings about bivy bags, common knowledge online, had been ignored, safety measures overlooked, and a young life lost as a result. This was not the first time tragedy had struck the camp. In 2014, 17-year-old Alec Lansing died after attempting to leave during a hike, his body found 2 weeks later at the bottom of a gorge. The camp was fined $112,000 but continued to operate. Former campers have spoken out, recalling the suffocating use of bivy bags and burrito wraps, which tightly restrained children in tarps or sleeping gear. One camper described feeling trapped, unable to breathe, like being cocooned in terror. Others, hearing of Clark's death, feared they had escaped only by chance. After Clark's death, the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services intervened. All campers were removed, and the camp's license was revoked. A petition demanding permanent closure gained thousands of signatures. Trails Carolina, however, claimed no wrongdoing, offering a vague expression of sadness and promising cooperation, while the lack of transparency told a far darker story.
In May of 2016, thru hiker Ian Crombie was stumbling through the snow in northern New Mexico on the Continental Divide Trail, or CDT for short.
It was November 14th, 2015, when 59-year-old Stephen Otter Olansky, known simply as Otter in the hiking community, began what would tragically become his final journey. A highly skilled outdoorsman, Otter had already earned the coveted Triple Crown of hiking, completing the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail. That day, he set out for his fifth trek along the Continental Divide Trail, planning to cover 75 miles south from Cumbres Pass near the New Mexico-Colorado border to Ghost Ranch, New Mexico. Armed with 2 weeks of supplies, a red and gray tent and winter gear, he believed his experience would carry him through. But nature had other plans. From the very beginning, the conditions were brutal. Deep snow blanketed the trail. Temperatures hovered well below freezing, and the mid-November landscape offered no mercy. Otter had stayed in Chema, New Mexico to prepare, reassuring his friend Ben Whitting that he would check in after 10 days, and if not, Ben should alert authorities. Confidence in his skill overshadowed the growing danger, but the moment he stepped onto the trail, the weight of the environment became clear. The snow was far deeper than he had anticipated. Each step was a struggle, each mile an exhausting battle. His journal reveals a man battling not only the elements but the creeping fear of miscalculation. Weakness set in. Fatigue became relentless, and at one point he attempted to turn back, managing only a single mile before collapsing. Trapped, isolated, and at the mercy of the wilderness, Otter had no choice but to return to his campsite, hoping to endure. Days turned into weeks. Frostbite began to claim him. Hunger gnawed at his strength, and the harsh winter refused to relent. In his journal and video messages, he admitted the stark reality. He had made a terrible mistake. One entry is particularly haunting, where he acknowledges that he should never have ventured out in such conditions, expressing hope that Ben would follow through and alert authorities. But by the time Ben did, on November 29th, more than 2 weeks had passed, and the situation had already slipped beyond rescue. Search and rescue teams launched a desperate hunt, but the wilderness had swallowed Otter whole. His phone battery was dead, eliminating any chance of locating him quickly. Resourceful as ever, he left signals. A large help sign in the snow, a fire set in a wooden shelter at Laguna's campground, and even makeshift skis crafted from metal to navigate the unforgiving terrain. Yet every effort was in vain. The cold, the isolation, and starvation conspired against him. By February 2016, Otter's body had succumbed to the merciless elements. He passed away alone in the wilderness he loved, his life claimed not by lack of skill or determination, but by the unforgiving power of nature itself. It wasn't until April 7th, 2016, that a fellow hiker, Ian Crombie, discovered him at Lagunita campground. Crombie's eyes fell upon a chilling message scratched into the restroom door. Dead CDT hiker inside. Call cops. Near his body, a note confirmed Otter's identity and implored authorities to act immediately. Recovered journals painted a heartbreaking portrait of his final days. Otter reflected on his choices with clarity, taking full responsibility, expressing regret, and even offering thanks to his friends. He had faced the wilderness with courage, skill, and ingenuity. But sometimes even the most prepared and experienced adventurers cannot overcome the raw brutality of winter.
This is the last known photo taken alive of the students from the Kuybyshev Aviation Institute during their 1973 skiing expedition through the Kola Peninsula.
It was late January 1973 when 10 students from the Kuybyshev Aviation Institute set out on what was meant to be an exhilarating ski expedition across the remote Kola Peninsula in northern Russia. Eager to escape the monotony of exams, the group planned to tackle a moderately challenging route, classified as Category 2. Among them were Michael Kuznetsov, a 24-year-old experienced ski leader, Valentin Zamanov, 23, the group's guide, Ilya Alcher, a cinematographer and recent graduate, 26-year-old engineer Lydia Martina, and several first-year students, Alexander Novas, Salov, Yuri Uskov, Artem Leant, Sergei Gusev, Yuri Kov, and Anatoly Perov. They left the village of Revda on January 25th, intending to reach Kov by January 31st. But just 2 days into the trek, disaster struck. As they ascended a pass in the icy Lero tundra above the Chiver River, all 10 students perished under circumstances that would forever remain shrouded in mystery. The official cause of death was hypothermia, but the details surrounding their final hours painted a far more chilling picture. Their bodies were discovered by chance, a day later, by a group of hikers from the Moscow Aviation Institute traveling along the same trail. 5 were found near a snow-covered tent, one hand frozen, gripping its edge, a desperate final attempt to cling to life. The hikers alerted authorities, sparking a rescue and recovery mission led by investigator Vladimir Borzenkov and military personnel. Over the next several months, more bodies were recovered in scattered locations, some hundreds of meters from the original campsite. Evidence suggested that in their final hours, the group had tried to escape the relentless weather, splitting up in a bid for survival. Zamanov and Leant were found crawling across frozen terrain, exhausted and defeated, while Alcher appeared to have tried returning to the group before succumbing. The weather that night had been merciless. On January 27th, temperatures plunged to a staggering -28 Hasubas, with winds reaching 50 meters per second. Setting up a tent or finding shelter in such conditions would have been nearly impossible. It seems some stayed near the tent, clinging to what little safety it offered, while others ventured out, hoping against hope to find an escape route. Their bravery met only with the cold, indifferent brutality of the tundra. The tragedy bore a haunting resemblance to the infamous 1959 Dyatlov Pass incident, where skilled hikers also perished under mysterious circumstances in extreme weather. Like that event, the Chiv tragedy was marked by strange group behavior, unanswered questions, and eerie anomalies. Families were denied access to autopsy results, personal belongings, and even a missing camera, while many victims were buried in sealed coffins, deepening the aura of secrecy and fear. Rumors swirled. Some whispered of the undisclosed military activity in the region, others speculated about forces beyond human comprehension. Decades later, in 2019, amateur investigator Viktor Voroshilov, a relative of one of the victims, retraced the group's steps across the frozen plateau. His findings confirmed the deadly weather conditions, blizzards, freezing temperatures, and violent winds, but also revealed unsettling reports of sudden disappearances, unexplained fear, and mysterious deaths among other travelers in the region. Stories emerged of hikers abandoning campsites for no apparent reason, or being found far from their equipment, lost and disoriented. Yet, before Voroshilov could fully unravel the truth, his own life ended tragically in a dispute unrelated to his investigation. His death left the Chiv tragedy unsolved, and its secrets buried beneath decades of snow and silence. It was October 5th, 2022, when Daniel and Emma Heritage, a young Australian couple, set out on a rock climbing trip in Banff National Park, Canada. Married for 4 years, both shared an unshakable passion for climbing, spending months exploring the rugged peaks of the Canadian Rockies. That day, they aimed to conquer the Mother's Day Buttress, a challenging route on Cascade Mountain. The climb was difficult but well within their skill level, meant to be their last ascent of the season before bigger adventures awaited them. Daniel, 28, led the climb, moving with the precision of someone who had spent years mastering mountains. As he reached the 5th pitch, a steep corner crack far tougher than expected, he called down to Emma, who waited below at a secure spot. He reassured her, his voice steady, admitting it was harder than anticipated. Emma waited for the usual signal, Daniel's safe call, but the moment stretched into an uneasy silence. 10 minutes passed, then 15, and an uneasy feeling began to creep into her chest. Then she saw it. The rope connecting them had gone slack, a large section dropping toward her. Panic surged. She shouted, asking what was happening, but before she could react, Daniel appeared in her line of sight, tumbling uncontrollably down the mountainside. Rocks tore at him as he fell, bouncing across ledges, the sound of impact swallowed by the mountain's vast silence. Emma's heart froze as she watched, powerless, until he landed hard on a ledge just below her. Rushing to him, she found Daniel unconscious, blood trickling from his mouth, his helmet offering little protection against the brutal 20-meter fall. Instinct and love took over. She cradled his head in her lap, whispering words of love and comfort, tears streaming freely as she held him close, clinging to the hope that he might open his eyes. But Daniel's spirit slipped away quietly, leaving Emma surrounded by the mountains he cherished, holding the man she loved as he breathed his last. When rescuers arrived, they had to evacuate Emma first, leaving Daniel behind. The wrenching separation added another layer of pain. As the sole witness, she recounted every horrifying moment to authorities, each retelling, reopening the wound. The practical burdens followed. Travel insurance wouldn't cover accidental death, and bringing Daniel home to Australia would cost tens of thousands. Emma's twin sister, Jessica, launched a GoFundMe campaign, raising $40,800 of the $50,000 needed, while Daniel's mother contributed $112,000 to cover an initial deposit at a Canadian funeral home. Determined, Emma refused to leave him behind. In 2023, Emma returned to the Mother's Day buttress, retracing the climb they had shared one last time. She wanted to understand how such an experienced climber could fall on a route they had both tackled with confidence. Standing above the spot where Daniel had fallen, she found no clear answers. Experts suggested he may have slipped or been caught off guard by a loose rock. It was noted he had not placed protective gear after the corner crack, perhaps assuming the terrain ahead was easier. Yet, no definitive cause could ever explain the tragedy. Daniel was remembered not just as a climber, but as a kind, adventurous, and loving man. Emma described him as her best friend, climbing partner, and the love of her life, someone who had shown her strength she didn't know she had.
That's right, Steve. Just a tragic turn of events up north on what would have been Emily's 20th birthday. Fish and Game officials say Emily's body was found just after 11 a.m. today.
It was November 20th, 2022, when 19-year-old Emily Sattel set out on what was meant to be the final, triumphant hike of an ambitious quest. A college sophomore from Westford, Massachusetts, Emily had already climbed 40 of New Hampshire's 48 peaks over 4,000 feet, and now, with her 20th birthday just days away, she aimed to complete the journey alone. That morning, her mother, Olivera, dropped her off at the Lafayette Place campground trailhead at 4:30 a.m. Emily wore light pants, a jacket, and trail running shoes, carrying only a small backpack with granola bars, a banana, water, and heated gloves. What she didn't carry, essentials for winter hiking like a map, compass, or proper insulated clothing, would prove fatal. Emily began her hike along the Franconia Ridge, planning to summit Mount Lafayette, Mount Lincoln, and Flume. At first, the ascent went smoothly, but by 11 a.m., light snow began falling. Olivera sent a quick text to check on her daughter, but there was no reply. The weather, invisible to Emily's preparations, quickly turned merciless. Temperatures plunged below zero. Winds reached 40 to 60 mph with gusts up to 95 mph, and the wind chill made it feel like 30 degrees. Trails that had once been familiar now vanished beneath layers of snow, each step an uncertain struggle against the storm. By noon, when Emily failed to return, her family reported her missing. Rescue efforts were launched immediately, but the mountain refused to give her up easily. Poor visibility, deep snow, and relentless wind slowed the search. Helicopters, scent dogs, and more than 60 ground searchers scoured the peaks, but the mountain remained unforgiving. On Tuesday, some of Emily's belongings and footprints were discovered near the headwaters of Lafayette Brook, offering hope. But progress stalled as night fell, and freezing conditions made the search too dangerous to continue. Finally, on Wednesday, November 23rd, around 11:15 a.m., Emily's body was found on the northwest side of Mount Lafayette. about 3/4 of a mile from the trail. Investigators believe she became disoriented in the worsening storm, losing her way as she struggled to find the trail. The extreme cold had claimed her. Recovering her body was itself a battle, requiring a New Hampshire Army National Guard helicopter to navigate the treacherous conditions. Emily's parents, Oliveira and Jorge, were devastated. Jorge, a gastroenterologist, had clung to hope during the search, while Oliveira, a psychiatrist, had feared the worst from the beginning. Reflecting later, she admitted that her medical knowledge had shown her the dire reality, even as she tried to remain calm for others. Emily had been a remarkable young woman, excelling in biochemistry and chemical biology at Vanderbilt University, volunteering at a Navajo reservation school, tackling drug abuse on campus, and pursuing a future as a doctor. Driven, kind-hearted, and brilliant, her loss left a gaping void. At her funeral, Oliveira called her a shooting star, so bright, so brilliant, yet gone far too soon. Emily's death sparked urgent conversations about hiking safety in New Hampshire's White Mountains, notorious for unpredictable weather. Officials emphasized preparation, carrying essential gear, checking mountain-specific forecasts, dressing for the worst, and never underestimating the wilderness. Her parents are now considering starting a nonprofit in her memory, hoping to raise awareness and educate hikers so that no one else would face the same tragedy.